James Holmes, Adam Lanza, Daniel Petrick, Devin Moore. Maybe a couple of these names stand out to you, but what do these names all have in common? They are all murderers whose murders were linked to the usage of violent video games. James Holmes went on a rampage in a Colorado movie theater and was a frequent player of the World of Warcraft. Adam Lanza, the shooter of Sandy Hook Elementary, it was said his existence largely involved playing violent computer games. Daniel Petrick killed his parents when they banned him from playing Halo 3 after he became obsessed with it. He would play for 18 hours a day, and he said he did it to get even. Although some would blame poor parenting for the behavior of some children, poor parenting is not the only problem. Violent video games can have a major effect on a child's behavior because excessive use can alter the brain. Dr. Vincent Matthews and his colleagues at Indiana University, who have long studied media violence, looked at what happened in the brains of 28 students who were randomly assigned to play either a first-person shooter game or a non-violent game every day for 1 week. None of these participants had prior gaming experience. Researchers found that those who played the violent video games showed less activity in areas that involved emotion, attention, and inhibition of our impulses. Matthews stated, "Behavioral studies have shown an increase in aggressive behavior after violent video games, and what we show is the physiological explanation for what the behavioral studies are showing that there are changes in the brain function that are likely related to that behavior." These kids only had to play video games for 1 week, and there were already changes in the brain. Can you imagine if these kids played these games for months and years and for hours every day? We have these things in our brains called mirror neurons. Psychologist Darcia Narvaez states, "We know now that there are mirror neurons in the brain that are activated when one watches someone else take action. In effect, watching someone take action is like participating in it yourself. So when a child plays a video game where they can kill people begging for mercy or burn people alive, they are practicing being cruel." Mirror neurons are the reason we may cry during movies. Not only do we feel the character's pain, but our minds are literally putting us in that situation. So when kids play violent games, their brains put them in those situations where they are killing. Being exposed to this will make the brain focus only on threats and reacting to those threats rather than thinking with the thoughtful parts of the brain. It also desensitizes players to violence and rewards players for simulating violence, and can teach children that violence is an acceptable way to resolve conflict. Our brains love rewards. So whenever we do something and we get rewarded for it, we're more likely to do that action again. Just like in video games, players can get points for killing or robbing. And they get a reward because they did this action. In young minds, it can be hard to separate fantasy from reality, especially with those mirror neurons we talked about. There's been a few cases where children went out and killed and said they learned it from playing a video game. One example was an 8-year-old child who killed his grandma after playing Grand Theft Auto. If you are unfamiliar with this game, it is a game that is associated with encouraging violence and awards points to players for killing people. He was playing this game just minutes before he took a gun and shot his own grandma. According to videogames.procon.org, as many as 97% of kids ages 12 through 17 play video games, and more than half of the 50 top-selling video games contain violence. Let me just let that sink in. 97%. That is a high percentage. What that says is that even if you don't have video games in your house, there's a really good chance that your kids' friends do. And these are the ages where kids are developing. So excessive use of violent video games can be detrimental to their brains. Yes, the cases I talked about are very extreme, but they still happened. And yes, there are many good things that come from video games. They can teach hand-eye coordination, they definitely can be educational, but only the right games can do that. These violent video games will not do that. They're not educational. So what can parents do? The biggest thing parents can do is monitor their children. They need to know what games they are playing. And if there are video games in the home, make sure it's in a room that's open. Don't let kids have video games in their bedroom where you can't see what they're playing. Parents need to be able to talk to their kids openly about the effects this violence has on them. Also, getting your kids involved. And that's involved in sports, music, dance, whatever it is. These kids need to be outside, being active, and putting their brains to good use. Find them a hobby. This is huge. Kids need to have hobbies to keep them preoccupied. Another thing parents can do, which their kids more than likely won't like, is if they don't play video games and they're worried about the games that friends are playing, they need to be able to contact those friends' parents and explain to them that you don't allow these video games, and that if you do, it's only for a limited time. This is a topic that people don't think is an issue, but it is, and so many tragedies have been linked to it. Educating ourselves on the violence can help prevent future tragedies. We live in a world where technology is changing. This means that video games are becoming more and more lifelike. We already have virtual reality games, and that's scary. So I urge parents to be cautious and be educated on the effects excessive use can have.